The era of Reconstruction, starting off in 1865 and ending in 1877, was a tough time in the American South. It was an even tougher time for newly freed African Americans who were just freed from the chains of slavery and would face severe discrimination and opposition for their societal growth in the South, mainly by conservative white Democrats who wished to uphold the pre-war standard of how society ran down here. However, there would be one African American man who would challenge this. He would bypass the discrimination, climb the political ladder, and eventually secure the spot as mayor of Pensacola during the era of Reconstruction. Hi, my name is Colin on History, and today I'm going to be discussing and talking about the story of Salvador T. Pons. Salvador T. Pons was born on December 23rd, 1835, somewhere in Florida. His father, John Pons, was a merchant seaman, while his mother, Maria Rosario, was a free woman of color. Salvador would actually have a pretty fortunate start in life. He lived in his family home in Pensacola, and at the age of 2, inherited an estate from his godfather. Now, about Pensacola, it was different practically from almost every single southern city here. It's situated on the Gulf Coast, but what you have to know about it is it was owned by several different countries: Spain, France, the United Kingdom, and eventually the United States. With this, there was an intermix of cultures going on here. Creoles, Native Americans, African Americans, whites, Spaniards. And in this whole thing, the big Creole population actually was different in the fact that they knew how to read. I know, kind of crazy. But yes, during Pensacola's upbringing, they would have a very good start in the maritime industry. And in the maritime industry, they allowed Creoles to be able to work there. And with that being said, you had to have some level of literacy to be able to work there, and some positions would kind of teach you how to read. Also, speaking of the Creole population, there would be a big urgency to be able to learn how to read for societal growth and mobility. And Salvador's family, growing up in a half Creole household, would prioritize private education in their home. Him and his older brother being taught how to read and write, which made him a little bit of a prominent. Speaking of which, he would grow up in this household and eventually work as a bricklayer at the naval yard. He would become a skilled mason there, and with due time, he would become a master mason. Now, what I said about Salvador was that he ended up becoming this master bricklayer. Here's the thing. It didn't matter if he knew how to read or write. In this time and age, he could not exactly just go and shoot up for a new position. Like in politics, he could not work in any medicine field or even law. So he stayed there at the naval yard, and he would stay there for a good deal of his life. That would come in handy later, by the way. Going in through the years, he would get married to Mary Eliza McDuff on December 21st, 1859. The next year, in 1860, he would have the first of his eventual 3 sons. Ooh, speaking of the 1860s. In the 1860s, there was this big conflict. I don't know if anybody's really heard of it, but it's called the American Civil War. And not much is actually known about Salvador's time during the Civil War. But what is known is that in 1864, he is noted as working as a mason or a laborer at Fort Barrancas. So that means he was putting in his bricklaying skills to work. After the American Civil War was over, a lot would change in the South and across the whole country for that matter. Here in Florida in 1868, the Florida Constitutional Convention would convene, and with its end would bring in the beginning of African Americans holding public office. Salvador T. Pons would hop on this opportunity, and in 1868 would be elected as the Escambia County representative in the Florida House of Representatives. A crazy event indeed in history. Salvador would go right to work as an Escambia County representative, and also at the same time would work as a master bricklayer here at the Pensacola Navy Yard, saying that lower representing politics did not pay the bills, so he would have to work a double job to support his now 3 sons, by the way. Now, speaking of what he did as a Escambia County representative, he would push for several different things. Firstly was repairing any damaged infrastructure that was damaged here during the American Civil War, like military and governmental buildings. Second, he would work to remove any of the existing black codes that were still around during this time, the ones that were implemented in 1865 and 1866 respectively at the end of the Civil War. He would also push for universal education, seeing how it can make one rise up the ranks of society in this new environment that was Reconstruction. He would also push for middle-class land ownership, seeing how somebody could very much keep themselves secure in this new society. And he would push for an idea of temperance. Growing up Catholic, he wished to see his fellow man build themselves up morally and spiritually. And lastly, and one very important detail about his political career was that he was known as a political maverick. He was able to outmaneuver many in the growing scene of politics here, and would actually be a moderate. He would align himself with the radical Republicans when he needed to be able to secure any legislation or anything in general, and would pick and choose his battles with the Democrats. So, in all reality, a moderate on all levels. One thing Pons would be at constant work with, not just as his first time as representative, or even the second, or even as his time as mayor. No, he would be at constant work with, was trying to bridge the gap between newly freed African Americans and whites living here in Escambia County. He would constantly try to push with them living among each other, and just trying to make the social mobility of African Americans high to a point to where there was no gap at all. Now, this would go on, and he would work really well as a representative of Escambia County. He would be noted as doing a really good job and get praised by some interesting figures of history. The former Confederate Secretary of the Navy and now lawyer of Pensacola at this time, Stephen R. Mallory, would quote, "Pons was the honest, honorable, and fit representative of Escambia County." These words mean so heavy. Imagine somebody who sided with the institution of preserving slavery in the form of a country would say such good words about him, and many others would say the same things about Pons. He was a growing prominent figure here in Florida. Now, things would get so much better for Pons in due time. Join me in the next part where I talk about his time as mayor.